could remember where the microphone was, boss.
Welcome to this discussion of film sound. As this sequence from Singing in the Rain suggests, film sound may seem the most transparent of the elements of film. What you record is what you get on the soundtrack, especially when one forgets, as Lena has here, where the microphone is. However, as the film ultimately argues, film sound is just as much of a form of representation as the film image. Film sound has no intrinsic claim to truth and has been manipulated from its beginnings. One of the first ways to approach the idea of film sound as a form of representation is to consider the concept of sonic fidelity. As Bordwell and Thompson discuss in Film Art, sonic fidelity refers to the extent to which the sound is faithful to the source as we conceive of it. In other words, sonic fidelity is based on our expectations as to what something should sound like. Now, it would seem natural that if one were going to show a card of, say, clinking glass bottles, you would just record the sound of those bottles live when filming the image. However, there are many reasons that is often not possible, including the presence of undesirable background noise, microphone sensitivity, or, in the case of animated films, no source from which to record sound during image production.
Hey, look out! Don't be afraid. I'm only the train whistle.
Here, the delivery of sheet music for the cartoon's sound design suggests that the enterprise of Foley work is an art form in itself, scored and conducted like a musical or symphony performance. Indeed, while watching, notice the different types of devices and tricks that are used to create sounds that we perceive as faithful to the image, and which suggest that this image actually exists in space and time.
Rehearsal, lights, picture.
Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
All aboard! All aboard!
Cows. Ready with your storm? Cut. Lights.
I'll be running along. Thanks ever so much.
How did you like it?
Oh, fine, fine. Only after all, wouldn't it be a lot easier just to wreck a real train?
As we can see in the way that Robert Benchley reacted to the sounds of shaking sheet metal and water pouring from a perforated hose as if he was in the midst of a real rainstorm rather than a cartoon image, film sound is an extremely effective means of representing space and time. And film sound achieves this through its three main components: music, noise, and speech. We can hear the effect of music and noise to orient us toward time and space in the famous opening long-take zoom of Coppola's The Conversation. Here we begin in almost quiet, and gradually begin to hear music playing softly in the square below. As the camera zooms in and the music grows louder, the entire shot is oriented, both in terms of image and sound, to place the spectator squarely within this space with no illusion of time. Watch and listen to how this 3-minute long take plays out in its entirety. The film's first cut to a reverse shot of a man holding a telescope and a long-range microphone also marks the conversation's first break in continuity. However, since the sound remains a constant presence, although it decreases in volume, we assume that the space and time from the previous shot have not radically changed. Here, while the image is no longer continuous, despite its use of continuity editing principles, the sound remains our anchor to this time and space, and the decrease in volume suggests the fullness of this space. In terms of time, film sound has two primary temporal relationships to the image. These include synchronous or asynchronous sound and simultaneous or non-simultaneous sound. Synchronous sound is when we hear the sound at the same time that we see the source producing that sound in the image. Asynchronous sound is when the sound and image are out of sync, as in this instance from Singing in the Rain, used for comic effect.
What's that?
The sound. It's out of synchronization.
Well, tell them to fix it.
Yes, sir.
What's this? Yvonne? Captured by Rouge Noir, the purple terror? Oh, my sword! I must fly to her side. Yvonne, my own.
Pierre will save me. Pierre.
Pierre is miles away, you witch.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Simultaneous sound is judged in relation to the film's narrative. A sound is simultaneous when it is heard at the same time as when the image takes place in the film's story. Take, for example, this tricky example from The Conversation.
Oh, God. Every time I see one of those old guys, I always think the same thing.
What do you think?
I always think that he was once somebody's baby boy.
Here we hear the conversation between the man and woman from the film's opening shot, playing over the image of the film's protagonist, Harry Caul, as played by Gene Hackman, as he walks across the street to his van. At first their dialogue sounds like it may be a sonic flashback, and that Caul is recalling the conversation he has just witnessed. Once Caul enters the surveillance van, we hear the same dialogue again, in particular the reference to somebody's baby boy, repeated in the woman's voice. And then we watch as Caul's assistant turns off a magnetic tape recorder. Here, the sound ultimately proves to be simultaneous with story events, because we are listening not to a repetition of the sound from earlier in the narrative, but to its recording playing back at this time in the film's story.
I think. He was once somebody's baby boy, and he had a mother and a father who loved him. And now there he is, half dead on a park bench. And where are his mother or his father, all his uncles now? Anyway, that's what I always think.
Synchronous, simultaneous sound is by far the most common. So much so that we only note when sound is asynchronous or non-simultaneous. Otherwise, we pay much more attention to space in relation to sound. In terms of space, we analyze film sound in relation to its perceived source in relation to the story world of the film, or the diegesis. Diegetic sound is sound that has a source in the story world. One test of this is whether a sound could possibly be heard by a character in that film. Non-diegetic sound, by contrast, comes from a source outside of the story world, or the diegesis. The most prevalent use of non-diegetic sound is music. Non-diegetic music is most often used to cue our emotions, and its origins date to the silent film era, when music was played in the theater to accompany the film images. One example comes from the climax of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, in which the main character Ferris Bueller, played by Matthew Broderick, is racing to get home before his parents discover that he has in fact not been sick, but has rather played hooky from school. In this clip, non-diegetic music plays over the diegetic sounds of Ferris's mother yelling at his sister, a siren in the background, and other diegetic speech to heighten the suspense.
Kill us? God, look at this mess. Paper all over the place. I'll never get this back in order.
course. Bueller.
No, don't get up. Hey, it smells delicious. Dinner's ready.
What? What's that?
In this sequence, as we've seen, the omnipresence of the music, despite constant cross-cutting between Ferris, Ferris's mother and sister, and his father, all in separate locations, indicates that this music is non-diegetic, as it is not linked to any specific source and can be heard at the same volume throughout. Once you've determined a sound is diegetic, there are two further distinctions. On-screen diegetic sound has a source in the frame, while the source for off-screen diegetic sound is outside of the frame. Understanding the distinction is key because a source of a sound can be found outside of a frame at a certain moment, but still remain in the diegesis and therefore remain diegetic. The second distinction is whether a diegetic sound has an internal or an external source. Internal diegetic sound comes from inside the mind of a character. It is subjective and can usually only be heard by a single character in the diegesis. External diegetic sound has a physical source in the story world, although that source may be on-screen or off-screen at any given moment. You can combine these terms to note that a particular sound is external, off-screen, and diegetic, to indicate an objective sound whose source is currently outside of the frame. It is important to note that a sound may change its status within a film or even within a single sequence. Take, for example, the changing status of the sounds in this sequence from Mel Brooks' High Anxiety to produce a comic effect.
Gee, Doc, I sure am glad you're taking over as the new head of the asylum. We haven't had a real chief since Dr. Ashley died.
Well, I just hope I do as good a job as Ashley did. He was a brilliant psychiatric innovator.
Yeah, innovator. Boy, when it was announced that you were going to take over, Dr. Montague blew his top. Between me, you, and the steering wheel, I guess Montague figured he had the job neatly tucked away in his back pocket, if you get my drift.
Is that so?
And then, from out of the blue, they go and get you, a professor from Harvard University. No offense.
None taken.
Boy, I tell you, it was a real shock to everybody when Ashley died. The guy was in tip-top shape.
Well, one can never predict a heart attack.
Heart attack? Huh! Don't make me laugh.
Brophy, what are you saying?
If you ask me, I think Dr. Ashley was a victim of foul play.
And that is Film Sound. Feel free to watch this again to review the terms and enjoy your screening.